You do lose, you want people to be sick about it. You want people to bounce back and move on to the next week and learn from your mistakes and not ever be satisfied with a loss. Last night we played a little better, but in no way, shape, or form should anyone be satisfied. For anyone to be satisfied with that is absolutely wrong, and I need to find out who they are so we address this situation. So some Washington players reportedly happy after a loss. Is this a big deal or not?
I think there lies the problem. Is it something that one reporter heard and it was maybe a private inside share between two players, or was it something on a grandiose scale? There really wasn't much to talk about after the game because Seattle went and did what they did, with the exception of the 3 callback touchdowns. This really isn't the game, and Richard Sherman and Pierre Garçon, there's nothing to talk about in this game. So here you come in the locker room and you have a journalist who possibly heard something and tried to make it more than what it was.
So no big deal?
I do not think so.
Stephen A.
I don't think if this was a personal in between two players having a conversation about something that may have happened in the game, I don't think it's a big deal. If you're talking about a locker room full of guys making noise, loudness when they just got their butts handed to them, then that's a different story.
Exactly, and that's where I'm going with that. Because obviously you're absolutely right when you talk about sometimes much could be made about nothing. Right. And if you're not privy to a private conversation, then obviously there have been times where reporters have been beyond the pale and players are perfectly within their right to speak to that. But I'm one of those people that I'd like to give my contemporaries the benefit of the doubt in this regard. If somebody's going to write a story about the locker room, just being a bit too cheerful after a loss, I don't think they're looking at 1 or 2 guys with 46 to 53 men in the locker room and saying, well, you know what, they were laughing. I'm going to give any contemporary of mine the benefit of the doubt in that regard to say that if you're inside of a locker room, you're not taking one guy smiling and laughing and thinking, and you're going to paint the whole locker room that way. If he said that was the atmosphere that existed in the locker room, I think it's safe to assume that's the atmosphere. Now, what I would say about Gruden is this. His comment is right on the money. He's absolutely right. And I will tell you this. Jay Gruden is going to tell me, I'm going to learn a lot about whether or not Jay Gruden is going to succeed or fail, not by what I see this season, but by what I see in the offseason.
So what you're saying?
Because clearly, it's a culture. It could potentially be a culture issue. And it may not be his fault. It might be Daniel Snyder strapping him and not letting him do things along with GM Allen. But if the Redskins, you just came off a 3-13 season. You're 1-4 right now. Now, granted, RG3 has been down, and we understand that. But we expected their defense to be a lot better than we've seen, okay? The other day, Alfred Morris, I mean, that's just Seattle, because Alfred Morris, he's shown he can run football. It don't matter.
He get 20 yards on 13
against Seattle. Against Seattle, so I understand that. But what's going to tell me a lot about Jay Gruden is the success he is going to have, or lack thereof, in trying to change the culture. Because it doesn't mean that the report is absolutely accurate, but what I'm saying is clearly something is not right when you consider the talent that the Redskins have and the fact that you're 1-4.
I like how he talked about it in here. He said he would investigate, which means he's not going to take it at face value. He's going to do some due diligence himself before he finds out what course of action needs to be taken. So I like that. And I definitely agree with you. He's probably going to change that culture if he's allowed to. He's allowed.
Okay, I like where you're going with this about our contemporaries. As you well know, and you fall into this category also, I've covered a lot of locker rooms in my time. In fact, I go all the way back to covering the Dodgers clubhouse back in the 70s. So I even have that on my resume. It's hard to characterize noise coming from a shower, and that was part of this report, because the shower is like an echo chamber, as you well know. And 2 guys can be cutting up in the shower sharing a private joke. And it can echo so loudly, it just reverberates through the whole locker room and can sound like 20 guys are cutting up and having a party in the shower, you know, just having a fun time about some private joke. Well, was that what was happening, or was it widespread across the locker room? Was the music loud? Were people holding little private conversations about where they were going after the game? I don't know. I'm going to give the Redskins a slight break here because, as you well know, in the previous game, which was on that Thursday night,
they got obliterated.
Oh, they just got obliterated. And Kirk Cousins was a flat-out nightmare that night. And that was kind of the end, to me, of that team's belief in Kirk Cousins. So for them to come back on Monday Night Football on the national stage again and force the best team in football to resort to a fake field goal to ice the game, which is what it came down to, I think they were a little relieved in the locker room, like, we did okay. But to your final point, new coach can't allow that to go because that's what you call your moral victory, right? Weren't they sort of celebrating a quote-unquote moral victory?
No excuse for that.
Yeah.
There are certain rules and regulations that I have as a reporter for over 2 decades. First of all, I'm not listening to anybody in the shower. I don't roll like that. You do what you want to do, what goes on in the shower.
You've heard it where they're just.
I'm just saying, I'll see you when you get out. I'll see you when you get out, you're in the locker room and you're standing in front of people. That's what I'm holding you accountable for. Hell, you could be talking about something private, your private business, and it could be something that makes you chuckle or whatever the case may be. Everybody doesn't, we can't call upon everybody to have the same identical reaction, but I do believe it's more than fair and it's not beyond the pale to expect a little, whether it's melancholy, whether it's disgust, something negative to permeate the locker room after a loss, a second consecutive loss, third consecutive loss, actually a 1-4 record. I do expect to walk into a locker room that's incredibly dissatisfied with where they are.
Agree.
That's got to come from your leaders.
And without getting into your personal business, what you said in the shower or anything like that, I do have a right to look at you and to gauge, you know, how much does this 1-4 start really affect this dude?
This is very true.
I do have a right to do that.
Okay.
And I don't think it takes, you know, peeling something from a shower or a conversation or whatever to reach that conclusion. I think you can reach that conclusion simply by walking around the locker room, looking at guys talking. I was famous for that. I'd walk around, Allen Iverson and all of those guys would tell you. I'd walk into the Sixers locker room. One of the first things I'd do was stand around. I'd literally stand in the middle of the locker room. I'd go like this.
Trying to gauge the atmosphere.
And I'm looking around because y'all just got spanked. Let me see.
So was everybody saying, uh-oh, Stephen A's in the house?
Oh, it was like that. Oh, it was like that.
Basketball's different.
My man Scoop Jackson, it was football, the Eagles too. Football, same thing. That's why my man Scoop Jackson calls me the Grim Reaper. He ain't lying, because I walk up in there and I'm like, I know what you're supposed to feel like when you get stomped, when you lose, when you get embarrassed. I know what that's supposed to look like. So if I walk up in there and it's like, hey, it's just another day, you got a problem. And not only that, remember, I covered John Chaney. I covered Larry Brown. These are Hall of Famers who were big. They were about winning. They were about doing things the right way. So I really didn't have to go that far because they made it clear what kind of attitude you were supposed to have when you are competing. And if guys didn't have that attitude, you went out. Just what they made a big deal about a couple of years ago. New York was going berserk because the Nets lost Game 7 to Chicago. And then immediately after that, I'm not talking about last year, I'm talking about the year before. And then immediately after that loss, right? What happened? They were out there at the club. Oh, New Yorkers killed them. I didn't report that, but I'm saying New Yorkers were all over them. Why? Because you just lost a Game 7. Mad Dog Chris Russo was on the air going off about that. How do you lose a Game 7? But you partying an hour later. People that spend their hard-earned money. Wait a minute. We've invested not just emotionally, but monetarily in you, and it's all right that you got spanked. People got a problem with that. So I think that's
the point of view.
What if the Sixers you covered just would wait until Stephen A. had to run to ride on deadline? Then they started laughing and turning up the music.
Well, I'm telling you this. I'm quite sure that happened. But see, here's why they called me the Grim Reaper. Because, number one, I always got folks in locker rooms. So even when I'm going, I'm going to get something.
Oh.
Number two, and more important.
You got snitches.
Always.
They dry snitching now?
I'm a reporter. I'm a reporter.
No snitching.
I'm a reporter. There's an NBA locker room that I don't know people in. I'm telling you right now. They say whatever they want. I'm bragging about it. Call it. There ain't a locker room in the NBA that I don't have people. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, here's the deal. Just because I don't talk about it today or tomorrow don't mean I ain't going to come back and revisit it. Oh, I don't go away. You see what I'm saying? I don't go away. And again, I don't get personal. I don't care about your personal business. It's none of my... Everything that I'm interested in points to what you're doing to win or lose games. The only time I venture beyond that is when the police blotters blow up and I have no choice. Outside of that, What's going on with you ain't none of my business.
Listening to your point of view, you make great points. You're looking at a team that's 4-17
Yeah.
in their last 21 games. So somebody put that report out there, I think the culture does need to change. That means that they're not where they should be mentally after a loss or even before a game going into that. Something has to change.
What do you tell your teammates? Like, if you see in that locker room, you got teammates joking around laughing, what do you tell them?
Well, you got to tell them it's beyond that. If this is what they're going to do after a loss, if this is how they take the attitude or the mentally approach of the game, we don't need you here. You don't belong on this team. You're not going to help us win ball games.
Last point. Skip Bayless brought it up on many occasions when talking about the playmaker Michael Irvin, covering those Dallas Cowboys team. First year, Jimmy Johnson walks up in there. What does Michael Irvin say? Got a list. These are the people you need to get rid of. These are the people you need to get out of here. Why would Michael Irvin, of all people, do something like that? You know why? Because Michael Irvin was addicted to winning. And there were people he knew who were not. And as a result, he said, they got to go.
And let me tell you, if Jimmy Johnson had walked through that Redskins locker room and it had been his the other night,
right.
some butts would have gotten chewed in front of the media. He would have made examples of people who were cutting up after a loss, even a close loss. Trust me.
That's what I'm talking
about. Because that's what Jay Gruden better start.
He's a winner.
Larry Brown was like that, too.
All right, let's go from the NFC East to the AFC East.